Hello there everyone, it's Nina Marie. Thanks for joining me today for another video. Today is a very exciting day because this is the reveal of the Simon Says Stamp and Tim Holtz STAMPtember surprise. I am so excited to share the projects that I have created today for you using the Simon Says Stamp exclusive Festive series. So there are a whole bunch of brand new stamps and dies from Simon Says Stamp that are going to be part of a technique workshop that Tim Holtz will be teaching at the end of September. So be sure to check out the Simon Says Stamp YouTube channel and also the blog for more information about the class. It will be September 28th. There is a kit that the class will be using so that you can follow along and make some fantastic projects that Tim will be teaching. But I wanted to share some ways that you can use the stamps and the dies that are included in that kit on their own to be able to make other projects. So after you've finished up with class and you want to make some more holiday goodness, these projects are going to get you going. So I'll be using Festive Watercolor, that's the main floral stamp set that's part of the kit, and I will be also using the complementing items as well, but we're going to start first with Festive Watercolor. Alright, so I've got some distressed watercolor paper in my Misty tool, and we're going to do some watercolor stamping with distress inks. This is one of my favorite ways to use distress inks because they reactivate so beautifully and stamp really well when you spritz them with water to create that watercolor effect. So I'm going to use a mini mister to spritz a little bit of water onto these stamps and then press them down onto the watercolor paper. I like giving the stamps a chance to get a really good impression into the paper so that way the ink starts to really soak in, and when you lift it off you get that great watercolor stamping. But we can elevate it by bringing in another ink pad and stamping just sections of those stamps with another color of ink. So we get a two-toned effect, which is going to mix with the first stamp impression and create a whole new color palette as they mix together. So as I stamp this pine needles ink over top of the ice spruce, I'm letting that ink have a chance to soak into the paper. Look at how we get these two-toned pine needles. I love these. And I stamped a whole bunch of them because I'm going to be working in batches here. So as I stamp one sheet of watercolor paper, I went and stamped a few more, so that way I have lots of pine needles that I can reach for to mass produce a bunch of tags. I'm sure you've watched many of us go through the process of mass production for making many things all at once, and this assembly line style is a really fantastic way to be able to maximize your time and get a lot of pieces all at once. It's so much easier to work in stages and do all of your stamping while you have all of your inks and paper out, rather than stamping just one set and then breaking it out later and doing another set. It makes it so much faster if you just do everything all at once in batches. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to stamp the flowers and the leaves and the pine needles and all the things that I'm going to use to decorate my tags. I'm doing that all at once and I'm stamping lots of them. So here I used worn lipstick and candied apple to create the two-tone effect for my flowers. As the ink will dry back, you're going to get this really rich red color. It's going to look gorgeous. There are also some great branches in the stamp set, so I'm going to stamp those with a couple of different brown inks. Starting first with Gathered Twigs, that's a lighter version of brown, and then I'm going to spritz that with water. I always spritz every one of my stamped impressions with water. Even when I'm stamping another layer on top of wet ink, I like to give it a light spritz, just so that way it helps keep the inks moving. And that's going to allow you to get that really gorgeous watercolor effect. And if you notice, I'm using as much of my watercolor paper as possible. I lined up these branches on the same paper that I had stamped the pine needles, just so that way I can maximize every inch of my cardstock and get as many pieces stamped. And because I keep the stamps in the same exact place inside of my Misty, it's real easy to just slip another piece of paper inside and continue stamping another sheet. When it came to the greenery, I picked out Bundled Sage and Rustic Wilderness. I'm going to stamp these onto the same sheets that I stamped my flowers. So I started first with bundled sage, spritzed that with a little bit of water, and then stamped that onto my watercolor paper. Again, make sure you give that a really good press so that way the ink has a chance to start soaking into the watercolor paper. Then I'll lift that off, clean off any extra bundled sage that might be sitting on top, and then I'll bring in Rustic Wilderness and just put a little bit of that ink in certain sections of my stamps, so that way I have a little bit of a variegated stamping that will happen once I spritz this with a little bit of water and press it over top of the bundled sage stamping. I just love these two-toned effects. It looks amazing, and you get that effortless watercolor look in no time. Now I'm bringing in some mica stains. After I've stamped all sorts of these images, I wanted to splatter them with a bit of mica stain for some texture. So I'm using Yuletide for that nice rich red color. Then I'm going to move on to Specimen. Specimen is a really nice green, and I thought that would go well with the leaves. It's okay if some of that splatter ends up on the flowers or the red on the leaves, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. It's more for the color splatter and the texture that we're providing to these images by splattering over them. I moved on to Frozen Fog for the pine needles. And then finally, Fallen Acorn was the brown that I picked out for our little branches. This is going to take some time to dry, but once it did, I was able to bring in the coordinating Festive watercolor dies, which are going to be perfect for cutting out all of these images. Every image from the stamp set has a die, so you're going to be able to cut out everything that you stamp, which is so awesome, including the snowflakes. I'm going to hold my dies in place with some washi tape so that way they don't shift as I run them through my die cut machine. And then I'll pull them out. As you can see, they cut out with really great detail, including some of the intricate details such as in between the leaves. Look at how these branches are so delicate. Isn't that beautiful? This watercolor series is such a fun set because you can use it in so many different ways for decorating lots of different types of projects. I might be making tags today, but you could use these to make cards or mixed media projects. If you watch to the end of the video, I'll actually show you a decor piece that I made with the leftovers. So I'm working on adding some glossy accents now to certain sections of my stamped images. I'm not covering the entire piece. I just want certain areas covered with a little bit of glitter. So not only am I adding glitter to the flowers, but then I'm also going to put glitter on things such as the pine needles and the little branch stems. I want everything to feel like they have a little bit of a sugar-crusted snow finish to them. I did also find that I wanted to color these little berry stems to have some red on the actual berries. So I'm going to pick up some Distress ink from the candied apple that I used for my stamping and just color over top of the berry images. The bundled sage is pretty light, but it will actually add a little bit of darker tone to the red in certain areas. So that does add a little bit of shading to them, and I do love how that really pops off of the green stem. Now I mentioned we were making tags, so let's talk about those tags. This is the Festive Tags die set. This is also part of the Technique Workshop kit. And these tags are really unique because there are 4 different shapes, but they also have a edging detail embossed into them. So when you die cut this, you're going to get that beautiful embossed edge around your cardstock, which looks really elegant and just elevates the tag design. So I've actually die cut a whole bunch of these. I have a variety of the 4 different shapes, and I've cut them from some Nina Desert Storm cardstock. I'm going to apply some of this Snowfall Grip Paste through the Sparkle Stencil from Tim Holtz, so that way I have a little bit of a sparkle texture behind the floral images that I'll be adding on top. This is a very subtle detail that does not end up showing through very much on the finished tags, but when it does, it just gives the tag a little bit of a frosty, sparkly detail that just looks beautiful peeking out from behind the floral elements. You notice I do have everything sorted on my desk right now with dishes, so this is helping me stay organized. I'm also going to use one of the reinforcers from the Festive tag set and cut that from some metallic cardstock. This is Simon Says Stamp Matte Gold, and it's a beautiful finish that's going to look gorgeous as the topper for my tag. So I'm gluing these with craft tacky glue to the top of each of my little tags, and that's going to give them a nice finish. Now we're ready to work on assembling. I've got my dishes here with all my pieces sorted, and that's helping me as I'm working on deciding what elements are going on each tag. I can just reach inside of the dishes that I've sorted the pieces into, and that's helping me find them a lot easier. So if you're going to make a whole bunch of these and have lots of pieces laying around, I encourage you to find some sort of vessels to put the pieces into so that you can find them as you're working. But I made each tag unique. I did not use the same arrangement on each tag. So every tag has a different orientation of the leaves and flowers, and I think that's what makes this fun. It allows you as the maker to have the creative experience of figuring out how you want to have your floral arrangements for each tag. And then that also makes them look extra special on the gifts and fun things that you'll be using these tags for, because they all have a unique appearance to them. I used a mix of liquid glue and foam tape to attach all of my pieces together. So now you can start to see these coming together. You can see how we have a different arrangement for each of the tags, and I even incorporated some of the snowflakes on some of them. Because I used foam squares, I've got a lot of dimension, which is fine for tags because we're not worrying about trying to mail these. So when they're sitting on a gift, it really doesn't matter that they're super bulky, which is one of the things I really love about making tags, is I can go all out with foam tape to my heart's content. Now what you're seeing me do now is add a little bit more adhesive to certain sections of my images, because I decided I wanted to bring in a little bit more gold and sprinkle on some of this gorgeous gold glass glitter. Simon Says Stamp carries this, and it is absolutely stunning. It looks so beautiful. It's got a crusty finish, and I just love how this catches the light and accents our gold reinforcer at the top of the tag. Speaking of the top of the tag, I need to add some ribbon, but I'm going to actually layer up some ribbon and twine onto the top of my tag, just for some extra fibers and texture. It just really looks cool to have a variety of pieces layered along the top. But if you like a more simple look, you could totally just add a piece of ribbon. But I actually pulled out a couple of different twines that I had in my stash, plus this red silk ribbon that is gorgeous. And that's going to be the perfect little finishing touch to the tops of my tags. In addition to the Festive Watercolor set, we also have Festive Sentiments stamp set. And the Festive Sentiments stamp set from Simon Says Stamp has lots of great greetings, and there are coordinating dies that you can use to cut them all out. So I'm going to stamp the sentiment Noel onto some brown cardstock with embossing ink. I'll stamp that twice just to make sure I get a really good impression. And I'm going to stamp all of the sentiments for my tags with the same Noel. I'm going to do that in batches. So again, I'm going to stamp everything, then bring in my embossing powder and sprinkle that over top, heat set each one, and then that will allow me to get through the stamping and embossing process pretty quickly. I'll use the coordinating die to cut these sentiments out, and then that's going to allow me to pop the greeting up off of my tag, again using some foam tape. I ended up leaving one tag plain without a sentiment, so you could see how that would end up looking. I wanted you to be able to see that you don't have to add the sentiment to the tag, but it does look cute. So now I have all of these tags minus one with a greeting on them. I love how the dark colored cardstock pops off of all of the beautiful color that we have on our tags. So many fun details applied to these tags, starting with the combination of watercolor stamping with distress inks, one of my favorite techniques. And then we added glitter to give a little bit of holiday sparkle. We've got the fun tags with the texture detail in the background. Again, it's subtle. Some of them you don't even see that texture very much at all, but then others you see it quite a bit. So it just gives a little bit of variety to the tags, but it also allows any of those empty spaces to have some sort of interest. It was so much fun to mix and match these pieces to create unique tags, and I had so much fun doing this. But I also had leftover pieces that I could have used to make more tags, but I decided I wanted to try making a decor piece. So there is also another die set that's part of the technique workshop that Tim Holtz is teaching for Simon Says Stamp, and that's called Festive Words. The festive words are huge. They're going to fill your cards so beautifully if you're making an A2 card, but they also work great for making mixed media projects or home decor elements. So I took this frame that I had from Home Goods and I stuck the peace sentiment paired with one of the sentiments from Festive Sentiments into the center of my frame. Then I decorated it with some of my leftover floral elements. I embossed with white embossing powder some snowflakes onto silver cardstock for a really nice shiny finish. I added a little bit of that snowfall grit paste along the edges of the glass for my frame, so it gives it a nice frosty finish. And then a fun little bow was attached to the top left of my frame, and then I also strategically adhered the ends of my bow in a fun little shape, just so it gives it some interest. And you may notice there is a paper doll tucked in the midst of all of my little florals along the right. Just fun to add a little unexpected touch there, and she looks so cute, bundled up for the winter season amongst the pretty little flowers. Oh my goodness, there was so much being shared in this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got something out of it and were inspired by the tags that I shared today, and then of course this mixed media piece that you got to see at the end. I didn't do a video for the mixed media piece. I just had fun creating with my leftover pieces, and it was just a fun process. If you would like to check out the technique workshop for Tim Holtz and Simon Says Stamp, be sure to check out the link in the video description that goes over to the Simon Says Stamp store, where you can find details about the kit and also the workshop itself, which will be at the end of September, September 28th. It's going to be free on YouTube, so even if you don't purchase the kit, you can still participate in the event and get inspired to create for the holiday season. I look forward to coming back and sharing more with you all, but I appreciate that you watched to the very end of this video, so thank you so very much. I will be seeing you soon, but until then, I hope you have a wonderful day.